What's the situation with the famous LGBT-free zones?
It was overblown. It was one activist firstly going, placing that this is not hostile to LGBTQ youth. Left has promised to decriminalize helping people get abortions, to lift the draconian abortion laws, whereas the other part, the third way, has been arguing for coming back to the pre-PiS.
Does PiS need to worry about their place in right-wing politics in Poland, and could Konfederacja kind of slowly replace them in that way?
So that is a brilliant question.
Even though Gray wasn't in the Poland video that I made back in December, Gray is going to give us an update on the situation there, which is going to be awesome because Gray is always a great source on politics, especially Polish politics, but generally, Gray is a great resource on all politics. Poland is one of the few countries where the far right is in, or has been in decline, at least in the last election. One of their far right parties is in decline, which thankfully is the biggest of the two far right parties, but it's not like the picture is super rosy either. It's complicated and it's messy, and it's an open question whether that situation is really going to solve itself in the short term. This is really nice because we've interacted a lot either in DMs or in chats, but this is the first time that we interact face to face. So this is really nice for me.
Exactly. It's so nice to speak with you finally.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've been looking forward. I didn't know that you were. We just set this up last minute, but yeah, I was looking forward to this. So what's the situation like since the election? The last update I had on the channel, I've been following it like from a distance, but essentially was PiS was in power, had started to dismantle a bunch of the institutions of democracy, had done a bunch of judicial reforms that were going to be really bad in the long term. At least they had started to do a lot of that work. And then they lost a major election at the end of last year. And since then, the new government, the new center-right, centrist to center-right government has been trying to fix some of that damage, but it's really hard to do that in a responsible way. Is that a good introduction? And what has been happening since then?
A good enough introduction. So first of all, call to action, please go join the Discord server if you haven't, because we I have been posting some updates on the situation as it developed back in January and February. So what has happened? First, we had a new government form. We had some shenanigans with PiS trying to appoint their own government, but they said they could, but everyone knew it's just to stall for time. Mm-hmm. Then the new government was formed, and it immediately started going on their mandate, what they promised, which was to basically clear everything out, every institution that was taken over, so the media and the judiciary and the foreign service, and also to audit all the companies that have finances from the government. They also investigated a couple of prominent cases. We had two members of the parliament, one of them is ex-minister of interior, and the other was his right-hand man, and they were investigated for... Okay, so the case is more complicated because basically they overreached during an investigation, while one of them was director of anti-corruption bureau, and while the civic coalition was saying that they should be persecuted for that, the Law and Justice was basically claiming that they shouldn't, and then the president gave them a pardon before the judiciary process ended.
And the important context would be to specify that the president is still not technically a member of PiS, but still siding with the PiS party. Yes.
Yes. Basically, he did it before they were even investigated. So the prosecution just dropped the case immediately and discuss a fiction whether the president could do it, whether he had the power, whether the constitutional courts could even rule on it, or should it be the other part of the court, highest court. So it just became a giant battle over the judiciary, and it bled into our local election and then European elections. But in the meantime, we also had the parliament set up 3 independent investigation committees. One to analyze the 2020 presidential election, which were basically designed to be done by mail, but never happened while they were financed. The other one was to investigate the use of Pegasus to invigilate the political opponents of the governing party of PiS. And the third one is to investigate what happened with visas for cash scandal.
Yeah, I think you're jumping over so much information that's like on the sides of this that maybe need some explanations for people who are trying to follow. So, for example, give us an overview of what Pegasus is.
So the Pegasus is basically a digital tool designed by, I think, the Israeli company, which was associated with their government. And it is used to basically download a lot of data through the backdoors of the phones.
Yeah, in short, it's like an extremely powerful spy software that's been used to target journalists and political activists in a bunch of countries. Supposedly, it was supposed to be used to target potential terrorists, but a bunch of authoritarian states throughout the world, and including Poland, have been using it to go after democratic activists, like left-wing activists, or just
it was like actual sitting members of parliament.
Oh, yeah, even worse there.
And more surprising, it was PiS's own political allies who were mostly targeted.
Okay.
Because PiS isn't really like a single party; it's very factionalized, and one of their coalition members was Sovereign Poland, and they were particularly hit by it.
Okay. So yeah,
PiS is actually known for being really shitty to their coalition partners, which is why when they were asked whether they could form a government, everybody knew that they couldn't, because no one wants to get into coalition with them.
Okay. Other than trying to do those things, what has the new government ruled like since coming into power compared to what their campaign promises were, basically?
There were a lot of campaign promises made, especially by the Civic Coalition, the party of Donald Tusk, and they haven't done a lot of that. But it's really forgiven by their political base because of how much emphasis was done during the campaign on punishing the PiS government for their crimes. So the fact that we have audits in companies with national funds, the fact that we currently are taking away political immunity to sitting MPs for possible crimes that can be prosecuted for. Those are all the things which kind of justifies the fact that Civic Coalition isn't fulfilling a lot of their promises. But on the other hand, we also have really big problems for their coalition members for the Third Way, which is coalition of Christian Democrats and kind of like centrist activists and agrarians. And also the left, which is three kind of social democratic parties in a trench coat of single political entity. Left has promised to decriminalize helping people get abortions, to lift the draconian abortion laws. There was some attacks about gay marriage and civic unions, whereas the other part, the Third Way, has been arguing for coming back to the pre-PiS abortion law. They also talked about opposing same-sex marriage. So on that front, there is a lot of problems within the coalition, which isn't helped due to the fact that in recent weeks we had two big legislative packages. One was for basically a development program for the youth if the young people wanted to buy houses. so that the government would cover part of the costs. And it was widely criticized by both Third Way and the left, mainly by the left, but it passed as compromise between PiS and the PO. And the other one was currently there was a bill to decriminalize helping women get abortions, and it was defeated with like 2-vote majority.
That's interesting because one of their big promises was to reverse.
Civic Coalition promised to reverse the previous PiS ruling, but they also promised to liberalize it further. Similarly to the left, but the Third Way said that they want only to come back to what it used to be before PiS. Part of the Third Way, the Polish People's Party, which is like the agrarian conservative party, broke from the coalition, and similarly a few sitting MPs for the Civic Coalition even refused to vote on the issue, and it failed despite the coalition nominally having a majority in parliament.
Okay, that's not great. What's the situation with the famous LGBT-free zones and those kinds of things in Poland at the moment?
They were like the fact itself back in I think it was 2020s. It was overblown. It was one activist firstly going like placing that this is not hostile to LGBTQ youths. But then like people started to adopt the card of rights of the families. But it was a lot of local governments which adopted it have since rescinded it. And in fact, some very liberal urban cities even adopted like the opposite to the card of the rights to protect the LGBTQ youths.
Okay. Okay. When I was still there, and this was very early days in the government formation, there was a big question over how much influence the left would have over the government, even though they were a very minority partner in the coalition, just because they were necessary for that majority to be able to form. How has that materialized?
So, like I said, it's actually 3 political parties in a trench coat. So the left itself is comprised of 2 parties, the New Left and the Left Together. And the New Left is comprised of is a merger of 2 other political parties, the Spring and the Democratic Left Alliance. And so during the campaign itself, the New Left have made it very clear that they want to get into government. They want to do anything that's possible to get PiS out of power and to punish those who have committed crimes during the time they were in government. Whereas Left Together was openly campaigning on we want social housing programs, we want some actual leftist policies to be introduced. And during the government formation, they basically, with the government, they did not take any political position and entered the confidence supply agreement. So they are supplying the vote. They supply the votes for the government formation. They supply the votes for the budget, and they will vote with the government whenever it suits their ideological needs. But in recent weeks, it was especially during the discussions on the housing policy when Civic Coalition wanted to pursue grants for the youths for their loan. The Left Together heavily criticized it as it would drive cost of houses up and basically transfer all the money into pockets of banks and housing developers instead of providing cheap houses. And they wanted to pursue a housing policy based on building new apartments. And it caused such a great rift between the government and the Left Together that they went in and had like a long till like I think midnight or 2 a.m. Discussion and vote within the party over whether or not they should withdraw their supply from not only the government but also the left. It ended up with them staying in despite all the hostilities, but like it's very clear.
Obviously, there's another far-right party that we haven't really talked about so far. Konfederacja did extremely well in the EU elections, better than expected. They got about 12%, and they took a lot from Third Way. specifically, if I'm not incorrect.
It looks that mathematically, when you look at the result of like local election and the parliamentary election, but we have to remember a couple of things. First of all, third way was okay. So we have something in Poland which formed over like a couple of election cycles, which is we have two main blocks, the rural and the urban party, and then we have like a third party which everyone votes to express their dissatisfaction with the fact that we have mostly two parties.
Okay.
So this election cycle, the third way was the party of kind of anti-establishmentarian vote. So for once they got into the government, once they clarified all of their policies, once they made sure that they stand softly against abortion, a part of their voters just left. The second thing we need to remember is the fact that we had like 3 elections in a row in a very short period of time. So a lot of smaller parties just ran out of funds and could not as effectively run their candidates. Third thing we have to remember was that a lot of their better candidates were simply ill-equipped to run in a European election because they already were part of the government, part of the current parliament, and they were sitting working there. And so with like 1 or 2 exceptions, a lot of their lists were made up of other members of the party. So that's why they did so poorly. On why Confederacja did so well, first of all, it's European elections, so anti-European parties are going to be really well. That's just how it is. That's also, if we recall, Corbyn, he could not get elected into the parliament, but he very easily could be elected into European Parliament.
Yeah, we've talked about that with other parties. It's actually a pretty common thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common thing. No worries there. Secondly, we had a lot of nationalist right-wing voters who left PiS and had to find themselves a place somewhere else. It isn't as big of a factor as many might think, but it also happened because the media finally stopped being just a propaganda machine for the government. We had some voices come in. No longer the Law and Justice Party is so prevalent in the media, so they went somewhere else. Next, we have the fact that the issues that were present in that election cycles were mostly about EU funds and about migration, which is something where the far right would do very well. And not a lot of parties contested really on those fields because Civic Coalition ran on, look, we are doing so well with all of those investigations, all of those audits. That's why we should vote for us. Whereas PiS went with, look, they are persecuting us. It's anti-democratic. Help get us into European Union so we can fight this. So it left a big hole for like people to actually clarify some political values. And Confederacja filled it very well because Polish society is notoriously anti-migration. And the last point was before the election, we had an incident. First, a few border guards have shot, which they are technically not allowed to do. And it caused discussion about whether we should change the rules and allow them to shoot automatic weapons while they are stationed at the border between Poland and Belarus, where a lot of migrants are just stopped and have to basically live in the woods between the two countries. And a few days later, after that, one of those migrants stabbed a young soldier with a makeshift knife, and that soldier died. So migration just gained more saliency, and it helped to propel Confederacja into a solid third place.
Yeah, there was something similar that happened in Germany a few days ahead of the EU election as well, actually. My question is more, Do you think the success of Confederația in this election, in the EU election, is something that is contained to the EU election because of just like the dynamics of EU election when it comes to migration, or is it a sign that Confederația is on the way up? And a kind of a follow-up question to that is, does PiS need to worry about their place in right-wing politics in Poland? And could Confederația kind of slowly replace them in that way?
So this is a brilliant question. Because is Confederația going to be the very big force on the right? Yes, they already are. A large block of members of the United Right coalition, which the PiS have outright refused to follow parliamentary discipline when on the votes where Confederația is concerned because of their cooperation. So there is a large chunk of right-wing members of PiS who feel more comfortable with Confederația than they are within their own political bloc. Can Confederația replicate the results from the EU election? They can, but it's less likely than the polls would suggest, especially because they are already on a downward trend and would have to make up for it that their issues and their policies are no longer under the lamplight. So the first question, can they replicate it? Probably not. Is PiS going to have to deal with them being on the right flank? Yes, they will. Is there going to be a realignment of the right wing of Polish politics at some point? Probably yes. Most people think it's going to be after current leader of the PiS party dies, then it will trigger a power struggle within it. And the one, can there be a coalition between PiS and Confederația? Because Confederația has been for a very large part saying that both PiS and the Civic Coalition are equally bad for Poland and they don't want to cooperate with either. But I think if they were to get a chance to cooperate with either of them, they would take it. So.
Yeah. I think the appeal of power is always bigger than the ideological positioning that they're taking for campaigns.
Yeah, so that's basically the answer to your question.
Okay. And final question. Yeah, I think you mentioned a little bit of this before, but one of the other things that PiS was doing was kind of taking over public media to turn it into a propaganda arm. What has the new government done in relation to that? Have they basically turned it into a propaganda arm for the new government, or have they been able to restore some of its independence to some extent?
Okay, so some of its independence is kind of a tricky part to answer, because a lot of people are going to point out that before the PiS government, the state TV has been unbiased, which isn't exactly true. The state TV in 2010, 2009 has been a state of war between the outgoing PiS government and incoming PO government. So if you look at distribution by party, 80% of the coverage of the state media has been of those two parties. During the 2015 presidential election, the main debates were between two candidates out of, I think, 5 or 6. So as far as we are concerned, it's not really that the media was unbiased, but it was very biased towards the two biggest parties. And the PiS just removed all of the coverage of PO and replaced it with their own. So now that we have turned, now that the government changed back again, they have taken over the national news back. They basically effectively purged them. And we returned back to like pre-PiS government distribution. So as the parties received basically as much coverage as they have popularity. So PiS and PO again received the lion's share and everyone else received scraps. But the situation is a little bit more complicated in the local news, in local newspapers, in local radio station, because a lot of them have been
lost your audio and lost your video again. Sure. I was hoping we were going to end this part of the conversation on a proper like thank you and goodbye this time, rather than having it be cut off by technical difficulties again. We almost got there, but yeah, I think after 3 attempts we're gonna stop it there. But that was I think a really good overview of the situation since where my video on Polish politics left off then. Even though Gray is not in the call anymore, I still want to thank M for coming on. That was incredibly easy to follow and a great way for me to catch up on a situation that I haven't had a lot of time to really follow that closely. Gray saying, to wrap up my point, local media had their finances restructured to come from state-sponsored industries, and as such, untangling their support of PiS is much harder to do than on a national level.
Don't forget to like and follow. This was a clip from the weekly Barely Informed live stream. You can catch it every Sunday on the main Barely Informed YouTube channel, and please support us on Patreon. The link for both of those are down below.